What is going on, guys? So today we're back with another Pokémon Masters video, and today we're actually going to give Hilda and Emboar their time in the limelight. We're actually going to be taking a little bit of a look into a couple of different aspects of their toolkit and try to kind of give a good idea. Hopefully, the goal with this video is to give you an idea on how hard you really want to go and try to scout for Hilda and Emboar. I guess I should say Hilda and Tepig technically, but because we do have a full evolution line already in the game, we're just basically going to talk mainly about Emboar, not really going to focus too much on Tepig and Pignite in this video. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about our base stats here, just to kind of get an idea of what we're working with when it comes to our stats. So we do have a 758 in HP, which is actually extremely freaking high. We do have a 317 in attack, which is actually really good. We do have an 85 on defense, which is meh, kind of not really that great. Then we do have 127 on the special attack, which kind of makes it pretty apparent which kind of striker we're actually going to be here. And then we do have special defense at 87, which is just a tad bit more than our physical defense. And then we do have a 135 on the speed there. So as we know in Pokemon Masters, one of the best things that you can have inside of a Pokemon is just a ton of raw damage output. Any Pokemon that can hold its own in terms of damage output can generally do pretty well in terms of like team composition and where it can fit, because as long as you have two support characters that can really support that striker and let that striker just go all out, you can generally do pretty well with it. And Emboar actually kind of does pretty good in the damage output area. So with a little setup, Emboar can actually output quite a bit of damage. Flame Charge is actually going to raise our speed, and then Try and Stop Us is going to raise our attack by double that of what our speed has actually been raised. So in theory, using Flame Charge 3 times actually yields us a positive 6 in terms of our attack buff. So I couldn't really find any concrete numbers on this, but I'm pretty sure based on a couple of things that I was pointed to, that the +6 actually translates to about a 1.6 times in damage. So take whatever your base power is, times it by 1.6. That's in theory how much damage output you're gonna have before you get into like defense calculations of the enemy Pokemon and yada yada yada. So in just 4 turns, 3 flame charges and 1 try and stop us, you can have an entire attack stat buff all the way up to level 6. Nice. On our 5th turn, we can then turn around and use Flare. Then on our 5th turn, we can turn around and use Flare Blitz, which multiplied by that 1.6, which we get from that +6 on our attack stat, we're looking at somewhere north of over 200 damage just before we get into super effectiveness, before we get into the defense of the opposing Pokemon. Like, that's actually quite a bit. That's a lot of damage. Nice. A drawback to this though is that Flare Blitz does actually have a recoil attached to it. So anytime that we actually use Flare Blitz, we do actually end up taking a little bit of damage right back, and kind of works the same way that the more we buff ourselves, the more damage we're gonna take. So you do have to be kind of careful with that, because you can end up shooting yourself in the foot, so to speak. Next, let's move on to our utility here. So I feel like Emboar sits in one of these really weird spots, because it has some utility in the early game, but in the late game, it really does start to fall off. Unfortunately, Emboar seems to act like a lone wolf. We do have Potion for our teammates, but if you remember that recoil damage that we talked about, we're gonna be needing potions for ourselves to keep ourselves alive if we don't have teammates that can heal us. Now, we do have this huge HP stat, which is actually really good that it makes us so bulky. But unfortunately, the way that we end up taking our own recoil damage means that we could end up being more of a crutch than an actual leg to this table that is a team that we're actually put on. Now in single player, you can actually use Emboar quite effectively, because it's not as much about longevity in single player. It's all about rushing out as much damage as you can generally, as quickly as possible to just overwhelm the enemy team. Usually if you can take out that middle Pokemon that that uses the sync move, you can usually kind of sweep the outside two relatively easy. Usually it's that center Pokemon that really gives you a lot of trouble, and if you can just push massive amounts of damage to that center Pokemon, usually that ends up meaning that you're going to be in a pretty decent position. With Emboar's toolkit, that works out fairly well for him in single player. But in co-op, that becomes a little bit of a different story. Because in co-op, it seems like the longer that you can hold on to a Pokemon, the better off you're gonna be. Emboar is kind of stuck in that weird spot because it can do a ton of damage in the early game. It can buff up really quick and then it can output some damage, but after that, like its big move, Flare Blitz, is going to start hurting itself. So it's going to start needing to use potions on itself, or you're going to have to start asking your teammates for heals. If nobody on the team has any kind of potions or any move that's actually going to be healing, then you kind of could get stuck in a really bad position and you could really burn out, pun intended, really fast in co-op because you're just going to basically lose your first Pokemon really early in the game, which ends up putting you and your entire team in a really bad spot. Next, let's move on to future proof. So this was one of the categories that I seem to talk about in every one of these Limelight videos, and it's weird because up until now I felt really hopeful for every single Pokemon that we've gotten, even Lyra, which I feel like Lyra and Meganium were kind of a similar set in terms of some of the talking points that we have for Emboar, but I'm just not as excited for Emboar's future as I was for Lyra. Emboar really does seem to be like one of those one-hit wonder Pokemon. And that kind of plays into, yes, his strategy of like opening up the floodgates and dealing a ton of damage and then basically killing yourself off. We already have his entire evolution line. He doesn't really have anything in his toolkit that alludes to a strategy in the near future or even possibly in the distant future that we know of that could be even more viable than what we already have now. Like, yeah, we already have Blaine, and Blaine would boost fire type attacks by making the weather sunny. So in theory, the more Pokemon that enable us to have a sunny type weather condition, I guess that would make Emboar better, but it really doesn't like play into his toolkit any. You're just kind of adding fuel to the fire, pun intended. I just don't see Hilda and Emboar adding any more fuel to the fire in terms of what we already have in the meta. If you have Hilda and Emboar, then yeah, you could probably use them pretty effectively, and they definitely have some use cases in the current like in-game meta, but it's nothing that we didn't already have a decent out for anyways. And I'm mainly talking about like very hard EX Karina with Lucario. The fire type weakness for Lucario, yeah, that's actually a pretty big deal here, but it's not like we didn't already have decent answers to that anyways. I would almost argue that Infernape is just as good in this situation, and paired with similar sync pairs that are going to boost Emboar, they're also going to boost Flint and Infernape as well. So it's not like Emboar really like takes over. It's not like he jumps in front of Infernape or even Arcanine in some situations and just says, hey, I'm way better, use me. He just kind of like slides to the side and says, hey, I'm also an option. With all that being said though, I do have a couple of team ideas that I think could be kind of interesting in practice. So these are all, you know, head theories. They're not actually, I don't have freaking Hilda, God, how do I forget her name like that? I don't actually have Hilda or Tepig, so I can't really just like show you any of these in practice, but these are just some things that I've thought up, and you'll kind of see a really common theme because our attack stat is kind of our main shtick here. I felt like it would be better to pair us with a support that's also going to highlight our attack stats. So Maylene is pretty much a staple in all three of these teams, just kind of throwing that out there. So if you had Hilda, Maylene, I also think that Blaine could add a little fuel to the fire like I spoke on earlier. Adding the sunny type weather condition does actually increase fire type damage a little bit. I wouldn't necessarily know, I'd like to know if it would actually be more beneficial to add on that, or if it would be more beneficial to just kind of add in other moves. The whole theory behind the Blaine team though is that we can only boost ourselves to a +6 stage in our attack stat. and then after that we're kind of stuck between Flame Charge and Try and Stop Us, already boosting up our attack so much, plus Maylene with Metatite boosting our attack, giving us a little bit of crit rate. I didn't feel like any other sync pair just blindly boosting attack would really benefit us too much. So I thought, what's another way to add more attack after we get to that 6th stage? Changing the weather, of course, does pretty good in this scenario. So it would actually be kind of interesting to run Hilda with Maylene and Blaine. And actually, I didn't even write this one down, but actually Hilda, Blaine, and Lyra would actually be really cool now that I think about it. That would actually be kind of interesting. I should have wrote that one down. Next we have Hilda, Maylene, like I said, gonna be a mainstay for this Pokemon right now. Flint and Infernape as well. So the whole idea behind this one is that Flint and Infernape do bring a little bit more special attack to the team, so you can kind of switch it up, whichever one kind of does better for your specific scenario. Like if the enemy Pokemon is gonna have a lower regular defense, or if it's gonna have a lower special defense, you can kind of mix and match. But you still do have plenty of firepower to go along with both Hilda and Flint. And then last but not least, we do have the Hilda, Maylene, and I thought about Skyla. So Skyla is actually going to be giving us a little bit of speed, but it's actually going to be filling us up with a little bit more defense here. So trying to basically give Emboar as much defense as we possibly can to try to make our longevity even longer would really let Emboar shine there. If we're able to use potions from Hilda plus use the potions from Skyla, we're gonna have a huge longevity compared to, you know, just only 2 potions. We're gonna have a lot more potions, a lot more defense, and it's just gonna make everything so much more fluid in terms of keeping Emboar alive even longer, which in turn, of course, does let Emboar really shine. So that is actually gonna be it for Hilda and Emboar, guys. Honestly, I'm gonna attempt to keep getting Hilda, but it's not one of those that I'm gonna dump any of my bank on. Like, I really don't feel like I need Hilda and Emboar at this moment. I don't feel like they're one of those that you just gotta have. It just isn't like that for me. So unfortunately, I wouldn't recommend breaking the bank over Hilda. It just doesn't seem like it's going to be worth it. If Hilda is possibly one of your favorite characters, if Emboar is one of your favorite Pokemon evolutions, maybe. But other than that, I don't really foresee them being flat out amazing right now. I just don't see it. With that being said though, we are actually going to go over to our shop. We're actually going to do, we'll just go ahead and do 2 daily discounts if we can. We'll try to, you know, go ahead and get Hilda with Tepig, and we'll also try to get Hilbert with Oshawott here. So let's go ahead and do, you know what, let's save that one to be the last one that we do. Let's go ahead and try out Hilbert with Oshawott here. So we do have quite a few other sync pairs that I'm still looking for, but of course that one would be the best one to get. No flashy animation, of course. So let's see what we get here. What kind of antenna? Anything interesting? Just a 3-star antenna. The doors can tell it all though. Let's see what doors we got. 4-star doors.
Closer to my goal.
It's a dupe. So, unfortunately, every time I see the 4-star, I'm like, yes! And then we get a dupe, so it's not so much yes anymore. Alright, the one that we've been waiting on, let's go ahead and try to get Hilda. Wouldn't it be really cool to get her in a video talking about her? Like, wouldn't that just be perfect? Let's go ahead and throw that down. No flashy animation. Let's see what kind of antenna we get here. Throwing that out, just a 3-star antenna. And our doors can tell us a little bit more. We do have 3-star doors, and it is anyways, that is actually going to be it for this video, guys. Thanks so much for hanging out. Thanks so much for watching. As always, the Discord link is down in the description below. I'm still lacking on getting co-op started. I have a plan, I just haven't implemented it yet, okay? Either way, thank you guys for hanging out. Thanks so much for watching. I'll go ahead and play those ending credits for you. Thank you guys so much for watching. Always remember that if you like to like videos, you could do that, but if you don't, you could be that guy. Otherwise, let me know what you have to say down in the comments below about the video. I do highly appreciate you guys watching, If you guys want to support me in any way, there are several links down in the description for Patreon, joining the community here on YouTube, or even just directly PayPal if that's your thing. I greatly appreciate everyone's name that's on screen, as you guys have showed some sort of support outside of just viewing the videos, and I thank you guys. You don't understand from the bottom of my heart. So until our next video, guys, I will catch you then.